The lost battle, the day the Maya and Aztecs wept together. Imagine twilight falling over two worlds. After the commotion, the echo of war conch shells silenced, smoke rising from Tenochtitlan and dissipating over the jungles of Petén like a mourning shroud covering Mesoamerica. This is the chronicle of the lost battle, the day when Maya and Aztecs, so different and yet so closely linked by the edge of tragedy, wept together before the abyss of history. In the heart of Anahuac, Tenochtitlan shone both as a joy and a warning. No one, not even the boldest visionaries among the subjugated peoples, could have foreseen the ending that was approaching. Here, arrogance was indistinguishable from splendor. Perfect canals, bustling markets, floating gardens. The great temple rose as a testament to an ordered cosmos, guarded by Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc. It was the era of a dominion as vast as it was precarious, sustained by the Triple Alliance, Texcoco, Tlacopan, and Tenochtitlan, and above all, by the tribute demanded from dozens of subjugated nations. Amatl, the paper of history, recorded offerings of gold, cacao, feathers, warriors and maidens to be sacrificed. But resentment simmered beneath the surface like lava beneath Popocatépetl. When La Malinche, the intermediary, the voice that made deadly dialogue possible, translated those first words, she sold the fate of the Mexica with the cunning of someone who understands internal fracture. Cortés, whose name already weighs like lead in memory, was barely the visible face of a civil war. Tlaxcaltecs, Huexotzincas, Otomíes, and other enemies of Tenochtitlan saw the opportunity to avenge ancestral humiliations. Their numbers were not small. Spanish reports estimated more than 100,000 indigenous allied warriors, compared to barely 1,000 Spaniards. The legend of the handful of conquerors crumbles in the face of the magnitude of internal betrayal. But the fall of Tenochtitlan was not a lightning strike, but a slow and deadly storm. The siege began when the aqueducts were cut off. Water, that life-giving force so often taken for granted, became a luxury. The elders of the neighborhood say that many drank the mud from the bottom of the chinampas, that the taste of Texcoco remained etched on the tongues of the survivors. The brigantines, monsters of wood and gunpowder, sailed across the lake, cutting off the food routes. Day after day, night after night, hunger seeped through the adobe and basalt walls. The gods, stunned by such suffering, remained silent. Cuauhtémoc, young but with a steely gaze, led the relentless resistance. His end, almost cinematic, came when he was captured in the middle of the lake, exhausted but proud. In front of Cortés, he did not beg for his life, but for the dignity of his people. I have done all I was obliged to do to defend my city and my vassals. I can do no more, so take this dagger and kill me with it. Even after, his martyrdom would become a living symbol. Neither the burning coals nor the torture could force him to give up the imaginary gold of his ancestors. Gold to him no longer had any value. What he had lost was an entire universe. For generations, his cry was repeated like a prayer. The pain was not for the military defeat, but for the destroyed cosmology, the breaking of the sun, and the order of the days. In Tenochtitlan, in the final moments, the role of women was fundamental, not only as mothers and weavers, but also as strategists, healers, and transmitters of information, leaders of neighborhoods, messengers during the nights of siege, and distributors of the scarce maize. Women like Malinche herself, symbol of a double betrayal and also of the power of the word, were the vital fabric that kept the resistance afloat until the very last day. Many, as the codices say, participated directly in the defense and even threw stones from the rooftops during the final battles. Their names, largely silenced by official history, live on in oral tradition. Meanwhile, far from the lake, where the sun barely filters through the foliage of the ceiba tree and the song of the quetzal, a very different kind of resistance erupted. By then, the Mayan world was a mosaic. Chichen Itza, defeated by plundering and time. Calakmul, swallowed by the thick jungle. But other cities, Mayapan, Tayasal, Kumarcaj, remained standing. In the face of the new invaders, the Maya clung not to unity, but to a multiplicity of strategies. Here, the conquistador found not an empire to behead, but a swarm of mobile forces, skilled in ambush. Pedro de Alvarado, nicknamed the Sun for his golden mane and incendiary cruelty, set out to conquer the Guatemalan highlands. Facing him, Tecun Umán, a legendary figure among the Quiche, led the last great clash. Tradition says that when Tecun Umán saw his quetzal fall, He merged with the spirit of the jaguar and confronted Alvarado personally, seeking not victory, but dignity in the face of the abyss. His death, though it sealed the fate of the Quiche, instilled a spirit of resistance that still travels the roads of Quetzaltenango. The war in Mayan lands was another tragedy, less grandiose and more stubborn. Every village bristling with palisades became a deadly trap for the invaders, and at the same time, a tomb for its own defenders. The cities fell, but the villages became non-existent, retreating into the mountains. The war never truly ended. Instead, it transformed into flight, sabotage, and the refusal to abandon language and ritual. Unlike the Aztec capital, here the invisible enemy was the jungle, the distance, the dispersion. The pain was slower, but just as deep. At the same time, the Pipil people of western Nahuatl, in what is now El Salvador, faced the conquest with a mix of lightning warfare and cultural resistance, embodied especially by the women healers, guardians of the fire, protectors of oral memory and language. Their resistance was not only military. Spanish repression was devastating, but Nahuatl identity found refuge in the whispers of grandmothers and in clandestine celebrations. But it was the silent scourge of smallpox that finished the work begun by gunpowder and betrayal. The disease, brought by the first outsiders, swept through entire villages before the Spanish vanguards even arrived. The wise men and priests were powerless in the face of the devastation. In many places, the arrival of the conqueror found communities already broken, without leaders, bodies lying in the plazas, and empty hearths. The spiritual impact was overwhelming. It seemed as if the gods had abandoned them. Where the spear could not prevail, the virus did. The myths say that the Aztec and Maya deities entered into a sacred mourning. The temples became mausoleums. The indigenous worldview wavered, but it did not die. Mourning became a crucible from which a new form of resistance emerged. The Nahuatl language survived in adapted songs and prayers. Pipil Nahuatl resisted under the guise of orality. The gods, far from disappearing, changed their faces. Tlazolteotl, goddess of purification and rebirth, was invoked at the first headless altars, while Ixchel, among the Maya, continued to be the protector of women in childbirth and weavers. Syncretism, far from being surrender, was the creative response to the abyss. Women continued to be the secret pillar. In the post-war period, they wove networks, passed down songs, remedies, legends of the lynx and fire, amaranth and corn seeds, forbidden recipes, and hybrid prayers. It was they who, in the silence of the nights, taught how to pronounce the sacred names that the conquest could not erase. The Indigenous alliance, a decisive and so often overlooked factor, involves the harsh paradox of the vanquished taking part in their own destruction. But it is also the genesis of a new Mesoamerica forged in the wound, weaving pain together with rebellion. Thus, Mestizo Mexico, multicultural Guatemala, and bilingual El Salvador are heirs to that day when Mayas and Aztecs, as well as Pipiles and Tlaxcaltecas, wept before the same abyss. In the days that followed, the Aztec city was covered in rubble and nettles. The abandoned Mayan temples watched as the new ceiba tree grew among their stones. But the spirit was not extinguished. Maya resistance continued, sometimes with the spear, sometimes with language, always with dignity. For more than a century, Pipiles and Mayas kept the flame alive in secrecy, preserving gods and genealogies, passing secrets down through generations. The lost battle was not the final word. The immense pain and the memory of Cuauhtémoc and Tecun Umán survived in the ceremonial fire and in the ancestral promise. Never abandon the root, even if the branch changes. Today, Nahuatl flourishes in the markets of Milpa Alta. Nahuatl is reborn in communities in El Salvador, and Quiche endures in the mountains of the Guatemalan Highlands. The jaguar does not sleep. What do you think? Was the fall inevitable, or were there moments that could have changed history? Is tragedy the price of resistance? Share your thoughts with us. And if the story of cultural persistence moves you, join us next week on Let's Rewrite Our History. Subscribe and join us to reconstruct the echo of civilizations that, despite everything, still speaks.